Hello, and welcome back to another episode of ABA Mom, where we empower families, support professionals, and explore meaningful conversation. Today's guest is someone many of you may already know online as the Bearded Behaviorist, Brian Middleton. Brian is a board-certified behavior analyst, educator, speaker, and host of Oh Behave podcast with an exclamation mark. Through his social media platforms, trainings, educational resources, he has become well-respected and a voice in our field. Today, we're talking about the evolution of ABA, acceptance commitment therapy, clinician wellness, and how value-based practices can improve outcomes for clients, families, and practitioners alike. Brian, for those that don't know you, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yeah. Thank you so much for the intro. I'm excited for this topic. So you may also see me going by on social media, BF Middleton, because my middle name is Franklin. And after avoiding that conversation for a long time, a very good friend made a very valid argument that I just need to be my own person. And that's part of who I am. So there you go. But yeah, so I am an autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, dysgraphic, partially deaf, possibly dyspraxic behavior analyst. Or as I like to say, I'm a human. I started out as a special ed teacher. I worked for 7 years in the special education setting. I did a year as an elementary school special ed teacher, and I also did a year of high school special ed, but 5 years of the time was in the middle school. And I will tell you right now, I love middle schoolers so much. Like I love high schoolers.
They're actually really fun. I love them too.
They're goofy, they're silly, but they're making those fun connections. So they'll start getting sarcasm. It's great. I also like the younger crowd too. Like I like littles. They're fun and they're sweet and energetic. And teenagers, oh my gosh, they're just the best in all the ways possible. So I just love the lifespan. But I will say that 5 years as the behavior specialist for Canyon View Middle School in Southern Utah was very formative and shaped a lot in my learning and the journey that led me here. I came across behavior analysis because as the behavior specialist, I was, according to other people, working miracles, and those miracles were me just treating the kids like people, right? But there were still barriers that I was hitting. And I'd had, some introduction to behavior and analytic concepts in my undergrad work, but I was still hitting those barriers. I went to an autism conference because a lot of the learners I worked with were autistic or ADHD. It was actually while working with these kids that I realized that I was autistic, and I pursued a formal diagnosis and got it because I was homeschooled. My first day of public school was my first day of practicum.
Wow, that must be so different.
It was very different. It was a whole new ball game for me. But like my mom was an anti-vaxxer before it was cool, and medicine was definitely not one of those things that she was a fan of. And so the diagnosis that I did get eventually was nonverbal learning disorder, which turns out is a very common assigned male at birth misdiagnosis for autistic boys. And so like it made a lot of sense what happened. And I was able to get my diagnosis relatively easy because I managed to get access to supports that other people just don't have access to. And so one of the things that I have a very firm opinion about, because I, out of curiosity, years later, went back and kind of explored as if I was just pursuing a diagnosis, what the process would look like. Because again, I got shortcuts. I had access to tools and resources other people could not have had. But it would have cost somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 out of pocket that insurance would not have reimbursed. And so when I say this next thing, I say it in light of that particular information. Self-diagnosis is valid. Until the system makes it possible for people to get a diagnosis without all those barriers, self-diagnosis is valid. And I frequently have other autistics or people who suspect that they're autistic ask me, is it worth it? And my stance that I say is, well, it depends on what you're going for. I, without understanding the whole journey, went for it thinking it would help. And in some ways it did. In other ways, it just made me feel more isolated because then the response was, well, that's what's wrong with you. when the reality is there's nothing wrong with me. It's the way my brain and body is structured, and pathologizing who we are as humans is not behavior analytic. The pathology paradigm is not compatible with radical behaviorism or functional contextualism. And yet that crept in before Lovaas. It was present before Lovaas because it was a cultural thing, but Lovaas very much brought that to the fore. And if you are not familiar with this article, I highly recommend it. The title is They Have a Voice, Are We Listening? And I think it was published in Perspectives in Behavior Analysis. I always forget the last names of both of them, but sorry, Joe, for butchering your name, Viziano, I think, is one of the two authors. And they do just a superb job of looking through and breaking down what the problem is. And it's a pretty big problem, because even though we may not be, as a field, hardcore Lovaasian for the most part anymore, it definitely has influenced our culture and influenced the way that we treat the people we support. It's also created its own issue of isolation in our field, because now we're deemed as being autism therapy, when applied behavior analysis was never a therapy. It is a philosophy and science that can apply to any living organism.
Right.
And so, like, we've been pigeonholed. And I understand behavior goes where reinforcement flows, but at the same time, or rather, maybe we need to push those boundaries, especially with professional organizations, and holding those professional organizations accountable and having these conversations. So, yeah, but that's a little bit who I am. I became a behavior analyst after discovering behavior analysis at that conference. I got my postmaster certificate or baccalaureate, I guess you could say, in applied behavior analysis from University of Cincinnati. At the time, I don't know if it's changed, but at the time it was definitely a degree mill. I was very frustrated by it. Bearded Behaviorist came about because of a frustrating interaction where a professor gave us a task to analyze the class, and I have a master's of education. So I know pedagogy, right? I've been teaching for years. Like, I know this stuff. And so he gave us a bonus assignment, extra credit assignment to analyze the class and give feedback. And I took that seriously. And so I analyzed the class and gave feedback. I also had my best friend and my wife review to make sure I was not coming off as anything other than helpful, because I've had clashes in the past, and, phrasing matters. And for every thing that I outlined that could have been a barrier or a problem, I presented 2 or 3 potential solutions. And the professor, when I posted it to the discussion board, decided that it would be appropriate for him to delete it and send me an email telling me that I was using problem-oriented thinking and not give me credit for that. And as punishment will do, I had some emotional responses. I may have composed anywhere from 5 to 10 different drafts of the email and deleted all of them. But the gist of my feedback boiled down to, why aren't we using behavior analysis to teach behavior analysis? And
That's a great
point. My end response was, instead of fighting him because it was not worth my time, I started Bearded Behaviorist on December 8th, 2018. Yeah, it's stuck in my brain, my brain, because it was a big day, and I did not know that it would turn into this. But I am a lowly behavior analyst. I only have a master's degree, but at the same time, I am proud to be a lowly behavior analyst. I have, despite the fact that my behavior analytic roots started in a degree mill. Again, I don't know about the quality of the program now, but speaking for it then, I pursued with passion my education in behavior analysis to the point that now people consider me an authority, an expert in different topics. And my response is, no, I'm a specialist. We're scientists together. We need to be scientists together. Behavior analysis does not need heroes. We need scientists, and we need humans. Yeah. So sorry for the long-winded intro, great. But there you go.
I actually wanted to ask, because in one of your videos, like, you kind of explained bearded, like, has a double meaning. So what is bearded behavior analysis?
There is a old saying that is not in use right now: to beard the lion in its den. It refers to the Old Testament interaction between King Saul and his servant when he was looking for somebody to fight Goliath. And his servant says, hey, this shepherd boy over here, he could fight Goliath. And Saul's like, Why would I pick a shepherd boy to fight this 10-foot tall dude? And the servant then told the story of how David, one of his lambs was stolen by a lion, and David pursued it into the den, grabbed the lion by its beard, and smote it, saving the lamb. And the saying to beard a problem or to beard the lion in its den means to directly address a problem.
I like it.
So
Perfect.
there you go.
Yeah.
So
Well,
you do
another
not
thing
have to have
too-
luscious facial locks to be a bearded
Yeah, you got to
behaviorist.
keep the beard though. Like,
No.
so ABA has significantly, we've kind of touched on that a little bit about how it's significantly changed over the years. It looks different now. I mean, that is true. Like, a lot of insurances, like where I live, it's like they won't even take some of the clients unless they have an autism diagnosis. So it's definitely, that seems to be the payable way to work as a behavior analyst, is to follow the traditional medical model. What changes do you think, or where do you think ABA is going, or where are we evolving?
Where we're evolving is, in my opinion, going to be deeply bound in the biopsychosocial model of disability. The Affordable Care Act, as a part of its implementation, required a transition into using biopsychosocial as a part of treatment. And so if you're a direct provider, like I am, I do work in the autism industry, then you may have noticed that more and more the insurance providers are requiring that biopsychosocial piece. And there's always this confusion when people talk about the medical model, and that confusion is that they don't finish the phrase. It's the medical model of disability. And the biopsychosocial model of disability is a counterpart to that. Now, you may have also heard of the social model of disability, and the social model is fantastic, but it has its problems, and I have my problems with it. One of those biggest problems is we deal with a diagonal ableism problem where certain people will still continue to be isolated because of biological or psychological, aka learned behavior and other psychological factors. And the way that the social model approaches disability is it says that disability arises as an interaction between the individual and the environment. Whereas the medical model and the moral model of disability both frame disability as something that's inherent within the person and needs to be fixed or corrected. That is mentalism. That's the homunculi. That is the ego and the id, which I will say, I want to give credit to Skinner and to Freud. Like, Skinner always described Freud in the kindest of terms whenever he spoke about Sigmund Freud. And Freud was describing a phenomena. But this is why behavior analytic, so somebody can refer to the ego and be describing a phenomena without being stuck within the mentalism. Because, we could say, well, the person's pride, or we could say the person's relational framework that they've developed around who they are, right? But long and short of it is the biopsychosocial model looks at disability as an interaction between impediments that can arise from either biological, psychological, which can include ontogenic, so learned behavior, or social factors, and frequently it's all three. And that interaction between those leads to disability. And now that we have that framework, we can operationally analyze disability. We can look at how disability arises and what's going on with it. If you want to learn more about that, APBA, I did a presentation for them called The Operant Analysis of Disability. I donated that presentation to APBA, and if you are not an APBA member, I highly encourage you to go get a membership. If I remember correctly, don't quote me, that presentation is included as a part of your of the membership, so you can access it.
Okay.
But that's the direction we're moving in. And if we continue to exert pressure both at an individual level, at small organizational level, at a group level, including through organizations such as APBA, we can push for those needed changes. Because the reality is that the core assumption of behavior analysis, of radical behaviorism, is that all behavior is selected for within its context and is functional within that context. Which means that pathologizing behavior just is not compatible with what we're doing.
Yeah.
It's not consistent with being a behavior analytic, but I want to be clear on something. We can drift away from doing what we're supposed to do as behavior analysts and still be a behavior analyst. It just means we're making an error because scientists can make errors, right? And scientists can correct our errors. We can have incorrect assumptions. We can ask the wrong questions, but then we can correct and redirect and start asking the right questions. And so that is very critical to our field in science. And we need to, with a capital NEED, to engage in that correction.
Yeah.
Not because it's a situation where we have to feel shame and tear ourselves apart, right? Anybody who argues that ABA, behavior analysis, needs to be dismantled clearly does not understand the true consequences of that, because that will leave hundreds of thousands of people without support that they very clearly need. And that it also means that they don't truly understand what behaviorism is about. But, big but here, that anti-ABA sentiment arose from somewhere. Remember, all behavior is selected for within its environment and is functional within that. And so just being like, oh, anti-ABA, I'm going to dismiss it as that's mentalistic. They don't understand. That misses the point.
Right.
And the point is that we need to learn. We need to listen. We need to apply. And there are always going to be people that will never be able to satisfy. I've had conversations with people who are just like, where I've genuinely broke it down for them and helped them to see where we're going. And their response was still, nope, it needs to be dismantled. And that's okay. But what's also okay is for, like, I don't love it, but what's even better is that when I've had that genuine conversation with people who were truly anti-ABA, the people who previously were like, nope, disgusting, done, it's a disease, get rid of it. Many of those people have been like, and now we have allies.
Yeah.
Now we have people who can advocate for what we really need. So, like, either we isolate ourselves and then push ourselves over the edge into oblivion, figuratively, or we engage and do what behavior analysts do best. And when we hear feedback presented to us from somebody who's not a behavior analyst, we do exactly the same thing that we would do with a parent, a teacher, a principal, which is we listen for the behavioral pieces. We apply our science. We acknowledge the other person and the communication they're engaging in. We respect them mutually, and we seek to find solutions together.
No, I think that's wonderful. I did want to touch base back when we were talking about the field and where some of it is becoming a little bit mentalistic. And, we are not talk therapists. And I also know you have a big emphasis on the ACT curriculum. So can you kind of just explain acceptance, commitment, therapy, or training, and what that really should look like as behavior analysts?
Yes. So let's start with the core of ACT. And I am more than happy to provide you with this image so that way people who are listening can actually find
we can
it.
pull it up on the video.
I'm going to go ahead and share this with you. Screen share. Here we go. So this is my loving rework of the Hexaflex. I call this the Flex-a-Hex because I love puns. So I replaced the center of the Hexaflex with, instead of psychological flexibility, flexible engagement. The reason why I did that is because acceptance and commitment training, that's our scope as behavior analysts, is focused on flexible engagement. The name tells us what we're doing. We're looking for a flexibility, but engaged as well. And I want to point out, if you're too flexible, you're disassociated. If you're too engaged, you're stuck. So they have to come together as a part of that process. And the thing about ACT and how it's frequently framed is it's frequently framed as, oh yes, these are some things that the research has shown to be effective in these sorts of problems. Great, but what's the next layer to that? What's the behavior analytic layer? Well, the behavior analytic layer is acceptance and commitment training and therapy both utilize our understanding of verbal behavior and how that operates within humans. Relational frame theory is the backbone of acceptance, commitment therapy, and training. RFT is is fantastic. There are definitely some people inside of behavior analysis that are not a big fan of it. They're the strict verbal behaviorists. And I'm actually working on hopefully my second peer-reviewed article. I'm working on my first one now. It's already outlined. I'm going to go into and break down those differences and the conflict and how that's impacting us as a field, because it is impacting us, is leading to harm to the client, the people we serve. But whether you are a hardcore verbal behaviorist or a accepting of RFT, I do want to point out that regardless, this approach, acceptance commitment therapy, is focused on verbal behavior and self-management strategies, and it's evidence-based. It's got research that backs it, that demonstrates it, and the research includes behavior analytic research. But I will add that we need to add more to that research. We need to validate it further, and part of validating that further is having discussions like this. So this is the outline of it. So values is creating purpose and direction. What is important to me? What are my ideals? Now, I frame this towards more of the general audience, but values could also be framed as long-term reinforcers and motivating operations. Diffusion is learning to step back. What do I need to do to put space between me and the struggle point? Am I in the driver's seat or my experiences? This is discrimination training, manding to yourself, because you can be the listener and speaker at the same time. And
That's a good point.
there's very real activities and actions that you can do to engage in diffusion. It's a phenomena that is well observed across multiple disciplines. Present moment engagement is being aware and engaged with now. What or where am I focusing my attention? Is it in the past, the future, or in the now? Again, going back to discrimination training, we're learning how to engage in a self-management strategy where we're bringing ourselves to the present, noticing what's happening in the present so that way we can engage. Self as context is seeing myself and others. One of my projects, I actually introduced something called others as context, which is new to the literature as far as I know. But the idea is we're seeing ourselves and others in context. Do I and others have permission to be human? That context matters. Again, going back to discrimination training, sometimes those rules govern behavior can be a real stinker. They can make life really hard.
Yeah.
And if you have that rules govern behavior that I should be X, I should be perfect, I shouldn't have made that mistake. Well, shoulda, coulda, woulda, but didn't, right? Or as I like to say to parents very regularly, should is well and good because it shows us the direction we want to go. But remember not to shoot on yourself and don't shoot on others, because the world stinks if that happens. So acceptance is learning non-judgmental awareness. Am I willing to experience difficult situations without struggling with it? Again, back to the discrimination training piece, right? This is engaging in tax to ourself, by the way, all of these. And acceptance is very critical. Now, I want to be clear on something. Acceptance is not resignation. Too often I have seen talk therapists and behavior analysts use acceptance as a weapon against disabled populations or people who are struggling. And that is not what acceptance is. Resignation is you just have to deal with it. Acceptance is this is what's happening now. And so, to borrow from one of my favorite little side special interests of improv, yes and is what ACT is all about. Committed action is moving towards values-informed goals. So values are not goals, but values inform goals. Values and goals have to pass the dead man test, because I don't want to feel tired is not something that passes the dead man test, because the dead man doesn't feel tired. But I do want to feel energetic. I do want to feel rested. I do want to feel engaged with my environment. That passes the dead man test. So what actions can I take to move towards what's important to me? And the cool thing about the Hexaflex or Flexihex, whichever you choose to use, I mostly just have fun. That's the only reason why I did this,
I like
the
it.
Flexihex. But the entire point of these intersecting lines is to point out that you can start at any point in this process and utilize this, because this is self-management strategies. One of the goals of behavior analysts is generalization. One of the most effective ways of getting generalization is to teach the learners self-management. And whether you're a strict verbal behaviorist or not, this has been validated as a behavior analytic tool. And we can very clearly engage in these sorts of things and teach these skills without having to get stuck in the trap of potentially falling into talk therapy. Now, my follow-up to that is, are there behavior analysts who can do talk therapy? Yes, there is actually an entire branch of behavior analysis that is talk therapy oriented, but you need to have the right training. I don't have that training. I have not pursued that training as of yet. I'm considering it, but I don't have that training. So I need to speak within my scope and operate within my scope. And I'll tell you right now that the way that ACT typically is applied is we pull up a curriculum, probably something that was published by Mark Dixon or by somebody else, and we sit down and we do worksheets. And that is ACT, right?
Yes.
That is,
Yes.
but that's one approach amongst many. And frankly, I think that's falling back on one of the problems that we have within education and behavior analysis, which is we're trying to teach higher order concepts without touching on the basics. And everything that I'm describing with the Flexihex, everything that I mentioned here are very behavioral things. When we say be mindful, that is incorrect. It's not fully incorrect, but it is incorrect, because mindfulness is a big umbrella. And underneath the mindfulness umbrella, it includes ACT, but ACT is not mindfulness.
Right.
Because mindfulness is also a religious tradition. It is also a cultural tradition. It's so much bigger. So we got to be really careful, because one, we're taking from another culture that does not deserve to be robbed of that tradition. And when I say robbed, I mean robbed of it in that we're oversimplifying something that is complex and beautiful. And we're also robbing ourselves of the behavior analytic aspects of this. So instead of saying mindfulness activities, I describe what we're doing. So diffusion, present moment, self as context, acceptance, values exercises, committed action. But each one of these things are very real. I forgot to ask you.
Yeah.
Is this a no cussing show?
No, you can totally cuss.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, you can totally cuss. You're good.
I get to introduce you to an activity that I'm introducing in the book that I'm on final stages for editing, and I'm about to send it out to my advanced readers. First, before I jump into that, I'll give you a little backstory. So, are you familiar with the film The Big Lebowski?
Yes, I love that film.
Are you familiar that there's a religion behind it called Dudism?
No, I was not.
If you go to dudism.com, you can join it. You can register as a Dudist priest. And here's the funny thing is Dudism, how it arose, if I remember correctly, I could be remembering incorrectly, is after The Big Lebowski. It didn't really do well in theaters, but it did really well on VHS and DVD. And it got like this really big cult following. And I forget which country it was. It might have been the UK. It might have been the US. But when the census went around and people were asked what religion there was a statistically significant enough group of people who said they were Dudists that it was classified as a religion. And it's really not that serious. It's really enjoyable. You can belong to other faiths and be a Dudist. And the reason I registered as a Dudist priest is because a good friend of mine years ago wanted me to marry him and his fiance. And then later the fiance changed her mind and wanted a family member to do it. So, but being a registered Dudist priest is kind of cool anyways. And in 2021, I was kind of playing around on Dudism and saw that there was this link to Abide University and Institute, which is the Dudist university. It is non-accredited, and anyone can go there and get themselves an honorary degree. And all their honorary degrees are not degrees you could get somewhere else. And as a joke, I got myself a doctorate in theology with emphasis in abidance counseling, because ACT, abidance, acceptance, they're synonyms.
Got
So
it.
I thought it was really funny. I posted it on my Facebook, and then all these people were like, "Oh, congratulations, Dr. Middleton." No, stop. It was a joke. It's not serious. I don't want to misrepresent myself. But that led to a conversation last year with my good friend Eric, where he and I were chatting back and forth, and I told him about that, and he's like, "Oh, that's really cool." And he's like, "You should put that on your resume." I said, "I can't. That's it. I didn't earn it. It's not an actual, like, it's an honorary degree, but like it's not an actual degree." And his response was, "Then earn it." And so the project that I'm getting really close to concluding on is titled Abidance Commitment Therapy, The Dude's Guide to an Accepting and Committed Life, which is me framing acceptance commitment therapy through The Big Lebowski and using the characters in The Big Lebowski, including the dude, to teach ACT. And the entire point of it is to make ACT acceptable. So not acceptable, accessible. Words. That was a weird one. Make ACT accessible. Make it so that it's more people can contact it and utilize it. And one of the activities that I use within this is a diffusion activity that allows for us to accept without struggling with the thing at the same time. And so here's what you do. You find a spot, because you're going to do some deep breathing. Like, if you don't get lightheaded from deep breathing, then don't do it. Right? Like, sorry, then you can do it anywhere. But if you do get lightheaded from deep breathing, don't do this while driving or something like that. But basically, you do some deep breaths, but while you're doing deep breaths, you're vocalizing. So it goes something like this. Fuck this. And you just keep doing that until you either laugh or you're feeling like you put a little distance between it. And it's silly, it's goofy, it's nothing new. Like, I'm sure there's other people who've done that sort of thing. But the idea is that it's something that we can actually do. It's engaging in tacting. It's labeling the situation through our words.
Right.
And if you want a kid appropriate version of it, we can do, "This sucks. This sucks," right? It's okay, right? Being able to label the problem in a way that allows them to put some space between it. Because what we don't need is toxic positivity.
Yes, we have a lot of that.
And vocal
Nowadays,
protest
every time.
is a right.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Right? Telling a kid they can't say this sucks is telling them they're not allowed to speak. Vocal protest is a human right. We should encourage vocal protest in ways that help the individual. So whenever I target vocal protests, I operationally define targeted vocal protests, the types of vocal protests that are getting in the way, and I try shaping towards pro-social vocal protest that helps them with self-management. Just fun insight.
No,
Also,
I think
I
that's
don't.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Possibly some barriers would be the family, not wanting them to say this sucks, like, I'm sure.
I mean, we can come up with variations.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
the key here is being flexible. It's allowing us to be able to
I love it.
work on those different skills. And the other project that I'm working on that I'm getting close to finishing, I call it Behavior Brain. And
Interesting. Okay.
Behavior Brain literally is focused on kids and teaching kids the skills. So it is not written for adults. It is literally a kid's book. It's going to be in kind of a comic book style format.
Ooh,
It's going to be like a little bit more produced than the Diary of the Wimpy Kid type thing.
okay.
I've just got I'm pulling the assets together right now. So I got an illustrator to do some design work for me, and I've set it up so that way I can use graphic design to reposition the character and do different things with it. And my goal is to publish the book and then publish the exercises and put the book out on YouTube and those sorts of things, make the book accessible in pricing. Because here's the thing that we don't need. We don't need one more person trying to monetize suffering. That's what we don't need, right? Would I like to make tons of money from this? Sure. Like, why not? But the reality is that even if I do get it published, I'm not going to make tons of money from it. And we need to help people, right? We need to help people. And these problems are very real problems that we are facing. And I want kids to have access to them. And so I'll share with you the early slide that I created for Behavior Brain. So this is your brain. Hi. Maybe not your brain specifically, but this is roughly what a brain looks like, right? And when we're having a big feeling, this is actually an application of some neuroscience. We have two big parts of the brain. We have our problem-solving brain, that's the forebrain, and we have our survival brain. Now, polyvagal theory actually shows us that we have our problem solving is this area. A big portion of our emotion centers is kind of in the center here. And then this is our lower brain, lizard brain. That's where fight or flight is. So it's a little bit more complex than this, but this was the initial introductory slide. So not too big of a deal. But when we're in problem solving brain, that's operant. But by the way, I'm saying this incorrectly on purpose. I want to point out that I'm saying it wrong. But like roughly speaking, that's operant behavior. So we're engaging in problem solving. And when we drop into survival mode or the survival brain, that tends to be a respondent behavior situation. And one of the biggest mistakes we make when it comes to extinction is we assume that all extinction is operant extinction, but there's respondent extinction. And when there's respondent extinction, I'll give you an example of respondent extinction. Drowning. Access to air is being blocked. And the extinction burst is the organism flailing and trying to get out of that condition. And so, like, I'm positive of it. We have been teaching extinction wrong because we're failing to account for the phylogenetic characteristics of us as humans and other organisms. So knowing this part is important. So this is where I brought my acronyms in, and I hate acronyms. So this is fun because I get to tell you why I did the acronyms. But just so you know, the right brain, left brain, like logical versus artistic, that has been debunked. The research has come back. Some of the researchers who originally did it actually debunked themselves. It was great. I love it when scientists do that sort of thing. But for metaphor, I'm using this approach. And so metaphorically speaking, we have our sex side and our sup side. The sex side is sensing, engaging, creating. And the sup side is solving, understanding, and problem solving. And when a big thing happens for a kid or for anybody, and we're starting to drop down into survival mode, that's where one of those sides or both is not operating together. And so we need to take a sec to figure out what's up.
Like it.
Right? Now, I want to point something out that I'm teaching you this from a behavior analytic perspective. From a talk therapy perspective, talk therapists figure out what's up and then take a sec. So that's out of our scope to go that direction, but it's in our scope to go this direction because and you'll see why in a minute. But that doesn't mean we can't work with talk therapists. I love working with talk therapists. I love being able to be like, hey, this is what we were practicing. And then be like, really? I saw a difference. But the sex side has two characteristics. So there's our move it or lose it. You'll notice that I use fun language to help this memorable because this part is less important for the kid to figure out, but it's like they don't have to remember the acronym. But like when a kid is using this, I need to take a sec to figure out okay, what do I need to do? Okay, sex side, move it or lose it. Movement has been shown through multiple studies, through multiple different research and behavioral scientific lenses to be effective at helping with regulation. Not just behavior analytic, others as well, including neurology. So movement helps with regulation of emotions. And here's the cool part. When you're looking at your kid who is struggling, their body is already telling you what they need to do. The kids who are hyperventilating, they need deep breathing. The kids whose shoulders and necks are tensing up, they need to stretch their neck. The kids who are running, they need to move their legs. The kids who are balling their fists up, they need to tense and release their muscles. Like, the body is already showing us what we need to do.
Showing you what you need. Yep.
We don't need to fight it. We need to use it. And we need to teach the kids that there's nothing wrong with their body. They're having a big feel. That's okay. Let's get those different rooms, the two sides, the second subside, to work together. Step one is this. The next step is name and reframe. Instead of I am mad, I feel mad. It's really simple, but at the same time, it's really complex. And I'll teach you some skills in a second with it. But the critical piece here is that regardless of whether the learner is vocal or not, we can use this because we can act as a tact within the environment. We can use AAC devices and sign language as well, but we can label what we're seeing. It's important that how we label it is careful because we don't want to escalate things with the kid. But there's ways that we can effectively teach these skills without it being overly wordy. I originally had name and reframe first and move it or lose it second until I read some research that demonstrated that sometimes trying to label an emotion when somebody is dysregulated leads to them being more dysregulated because they associate it with being criticized. And from a behavior analytic perspective, that is a abolishing operation. Basically, it's a CMOR, conditioned reflexive condition motivating operation. It's signaling worsening conditions. So instead of starting with name and reframe, we start with movement. Note that start doesn't mean we always have to go this route. This is just the direction that I encourage us to teach in. So labeling emotions in a way that allows for distance from them is an important regulation strategy. And whenever I'm working with kids who are vocal, I love teaching them how to take a sec using gaming terminology because I feel emotion is our beginner level. I notice I feel the emotion is pro level, and boss level is I notice I'm having the thought that I feel. Or if you just want to be lazy and shortcut it, you can go straight to my body is feeling. It looks like your body is feeling frustrated.
Yeah.
I wonder why that is, right? It's so easy. It puts some distance between the thing. And this goes back to verbal behavior, is if a kid has access, if we have motivating operations, if we see CMORs, CMSs, and CMOTs, then you can use this with a kid, a learner, as long as they have a way where they can perceive the communication. So the myth that you have to have complex language to use ACT is utter horseshit. Like, you do not have to have language to act, like spoken language, to access this. And this is an early version of the Flexa-Hex. Diffusion, present moment, and self as context are being hit by all three of those. Sorry, both of those, all two of those. And there's different ways that we can practice it with the kids. But now we move into figure out what's up. So we pick out the problem. Nice and easy, pretty straightforward. So we're labeling the problem. We're engaging in tacting procedures. And the research shows that engaging in problem solving helps with regulation, long-term health and well-being. Hey, if we work at transferring stimulus control to the individual so that they can identify the problems they're encountering and see them, is that not discrimination training? Is that not self-management? We could totally do this. And to start with, especially for younger learners or learners who might have some cognitive struggles, we can guide them through the process. We can show them how to pick out the problem, and we can show them how to do it in a way that uses present moment awareness, diffusion techniques, self as context, and acceptance. And so the next step after that is solve and resolve. That's where we're figuring out the components and finding solutions. And to start with all the learners that I work with, I start with prompting and suggesting. I usually like to do, especially for younger learners, a quasi-forced choice where I say, well, we could do this, or we could do something else. And that something else allows for there to be a high degree of freedom without too many choices. Because if they select something else, we go right back to the drawing board, right? It
Right.
allows for more choice and empowers the kid. And so problem solving is super, super critical throughout this process. And I like to put this warning in, make sure you're empowering problem solving. That means you'll not like the solutions they come up with sometimes. And we got to learn to be flexible, and we got to teach them how to be flexible, because what happens if the problem, the solution they present is not possible? Well, then we go right back into name and reframe, right? We go right back into move it or lose it if we're feeling the frustration. We identify the new problem. So this is a cycle. And I want to be clear on something. This is a model of ACT. It is not ACT. The DNAV in the model is another model.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fantastic one. I highly recommend it. In fact, I use components of it in my work all the time. The Thriving Adolescent is the book that it teaches that. Stuff That Sucks is another good book that's accessible to teenagers. Fair warning, that book does cover topics such as sexual assault. So make sure that the parents are aware
Okay.
before you use that. Your Life, Your Way is another good one. And those are some guided workbooks that you can use. But the critical thing here is that this is a model, which means it's flexible. If you start catching yourself saying, I should, then we went down the wrong path here. The idea is that these are strategies. The strategies that I'm naming are not new. I just did the novel thing of putting them together in a fun, easy to remember way of perceiving it, so that we can apply it in a behavior analytic way, because now we can practice move it or lose it without the kid being in a point of dysregulation. We can engage in scenarios. We can engage in role play. We can engage in all sorts of fun things for practicing movement activities. We can go into scenarios where it's more restrictive. Oh, you normally like to stand up and stretch when you're moving? Well, you can't do that because you're at church or you're in class. What can you do instead? Right? Name and reframe. We get to practice that. That's how we do
Right.
that sort of thing. And you could name and reframe in so many fun ways. You can have it so it's Batman who's doing the name and reframing because Robin accidentally dinged him in the head with a batarang, okay? Like, we can engage and pick out the problem and solve and resolve all of those different things. So that hits self as context, acceptance, and committed action. It allows us to be able to engage immediately. And of course, it also hits these ones too, but these are the core three that's going on. So what about values? Values are the hardest one. And whenever I talk about values and reluctant learners, I like to point out the fastest way to get somebody to not tell you their values is put a worksheet in front of their face.
Yes.
And so I like I've since named this step. It's called spot your values, but I like to talk about being a values detective and figuring out yeps and nopes. Now, nopes don't pass the dead man test, but nopes do tell us where boundaries are. Nopes do tell us what we're avoiding, and usually on the opposite side of a nope is a yep. It's a thing that matters. Here's the thing about kids, or you can also do yums and yucks, by the way. That's another way of doing it. I'm not going to go into that, but anyways, here are some universal values that are consistent between kids. You can start with the basics and build from there. But like safety, that's a value. Security, kindness, honesty, respect, inclusion, responsibility, courage, creativity, curiosity. Fun is a value. I want to have fun. Don't you want to have fun? Girls want to have fun. Sorry, I had to make the reference. But the point being that what we're going for is making this accessible to kids, to people, to humans. I've had parents where I'm using this approach and they're like, can I use this for myself? And I'm like, no,
Yes. He said no.
unacceptable. I always start, if I have a good relationship with them, I say, no, unacceptable. But I'm like, of course you can. I want you to use this, please,
Yeah.
because it's a set of strategies that makes a huge difference. And
No, I think that's
that's
amazing.
that's what we're going for is making this accessible.
And I like your reframe and even just saying, I am mad versus I feel mad, because mad is not necessarily something you are. That's just how you feel in the moment. And I like how you use reframing and you're using it also as a way to play too, because that's how a lot of learning happens is through play. So I think that's amazing. I can't wait for this to come out. That's great.
Well,
Really
let
great
me see if
commitment.
I can pull up the little character so you guys can get a sneak peek of what he's going to look like. Because my struggle that I was having was I was trying to do this in Canva and all the I couldn't get enough matching graphics to make it work, and I was trying to make it so that it wasn't representing any one group, and it was just looking awful. And then one of my RBTs actually gave me the inspiration for this, and so I would like you to meet Buddy.
He's great.
This is Behavior Buddy, and Behavior Buddy introduces you to your brain
Perfect.
and allows you to be able to see your brain within context. And Buddy will interact with other little buddies and engage with each other. And that's where the little comic strip style is going to be. Once the core book is published, which the core book will have examples of ways to practice with kids in a very realistic way. It'll also have modeling of how to practice, where Buddy will model some situations, and it'll cover a lot of topics, everything from making a mistake to handling things that we can't control to working through situations where it's not fair, but we got to do the best we can, to grief. And
Big one.
that's going to be the core book. And then once the core book is out, I'm going to record it and present it on YouTube. So that way it's free and accessible. I do want people to buy it if they can afford it, but I also want people to access it. And then after that, we're going to be doing behavior adventures, which is going to be a choose your own adventure style.
Okay, that's too much fun.
And the entire, so I'll do a book or a series of books. I'll start with one. Not going to do too much, but the book will allow for being able to turn to different pages and see how things could pan out. And then the YouTube version will be, you watch the YouTube clip for the little pieces, and then you get to click where
The
you go
next video.
next. So
I
that
love
way it can be interactive. And then, of course, the last book that I'll put out, which I will try to make very accessibly priced, will be basically scenarios and working through how to do these sorts of things across multiple age groups. So like how would we do this with littles, very little kids? How will we do this with, maybe a little bit older, but not quite at that elementary school age? How would we focus on the elementary school age? How will we do this with teenagers? How would this apply to adults? Young adults versus older adults. But the important thing is that I want everything to be accessible. So as of right now, I'm planning on self-publishing, because if I go through an actual publisher, they're probably going to prevent me from putting this stuff out in a way that's freely accessible. And I don't want that. I am tired of us having to capitalize on every tiny little thing. We don't need another subscription model. We don't need another curriculum that you have to spend $150 fucking dollars on.
Right.
We need tools that people can use. And the reason why I'm going through in detail right now in this podcast, even before I publish the book, is because I use it.
Yeah.
Use it with your kids. Use it with your own kids. Use it with yourself. I don't care.
I think it's great. Yeah.
Just make sure that if you do something with it, like that you publish, give me credit for it and don't sell it for a profit, or at least loop me in on it. Okay. Cause that's the one piece that like, this is my IP, and I will protect anybody who tries to monetize it, mostly because I don't want it to be turned into a cash grab. I want it to be used as an accessible tool.
Right.
But like, don't be a jerk. Okay. Don't be a jerk, but teach people, share these ideas, practice them, come to me and tell me what works and what doesn't work. Give me feedback. Like, show me how I can improve it. If you're if somebody is listening as an indie publisher and you're down with this sickness of putting it out there for, yes, another reference, sorry, of putting it out there and making it accessible, I would love to talk. But like, we don't need heroes. We need humans and scientists. We don't need another monetization scheme. We need to make it accessible so that people can use it. And ACT is very, very, very behavior analytic. And anybody who tells you otherwise either is selling you something or they don't understand it.
Yes. Or using it incorrectly.
Sometimes correctly, like quasi-correctly. It works enough the way it's being used that it clearly is being sticking around. The problem is it's just not. We can refine this. We can improve outcomes. We can make this technology something that can be generalized.
Right. And honestly, like, I think the way that you have explained this and kind of how to apply it, because I think that's where we kind of struggle on the behavioral analytical side. It's like, okay, so like I get it. I get the concept of ACT, but how can I apply it? I think you gave some really great examples on how to apply it. And I think that behavior buddy and the your choose your own adventures, like you can definitely apply some of that curriculum with that too. So I think
Just so you know, choose your own adventure is actually a trademarked term.
it's choose your own adventure.
We can say choose your own adventure without getting in trouble, but I looked it up because I wanted to make sure that I was not violating anything, and
Okay, perfect. That's okay.
the
Now
company that the
copyright.
company that owns it defends it viciously. If you want to get a little bit more of an in-depth understanding of the behavior analytic terminology, I have an older presentation I put out through Mindful Behavior, mindfulbehaviorllc.org. Full disclosure, I am a partner in Mindful Behavior. So I want to make sure that I let you know about the conflict of interest piece. Not that I make money off of it. I put money into it, but that's a different story. But the title of the presentation is Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, Verbal Behavior and Self-Management in Action. And whenever people ask me, so what level of knowledge do you have to have for this? I'm like, you have to understand verbal behavior.
Right.
Okay. Do not try to tackle this sucker without understanding that. And because accessibility is an important part of both mindful behavior and my work, it's priced at $15 for the CE. It's I think a 1.5 CEs. Oh, no, sorry, one general CE, my bad. It's an hour and 20 minutes. But the entire focus is make this accessible. Make it so that people can use it. And whether you use Behavior Brain or DNAV or Mark Dixon's curriculum, I always forget, AIM, there we go, the AIM curriculum. And they have a new curriculum out that I just got my hands on because I want to read it. I want to see how it stacks up, because Mark and his team took feedback and they started applying it. So I'm like, hey, cool. They're good scientists. I love it. Or if you want to, so this other book that I'm going to recommend, it's more for talk therapists, but I definitely recommend reading it from the behavior analytic perspective. But it's ACT for Treating Children. And Dr. Black, I think, she introduces the Kid Flex, which is basically the Hexaflex for kids. And again, I don't care what model you use. I care that you understand how to use it and how to apply it in a way that's very behavior analytic, because acceptance commitment therapy is the overarching name, but we're the trainers. That's our job. That's our focus. And the cool part about it is, yes, within the behavior brain context, we take a sec to figure out what's up, and we teach in that order. But once a kid starts getting it, they start applying it the way it works for them. So they can do it at any order they want. I've had kids start with their values before doing anything else. I've had kids start with pick out the problem, then move it or lose it, then name and reframe, then solve and resolve. The order is less important when they apply it, because that's what behavior analytic application should look like, is the individual adapting it to their needs.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that flexibility in there too, that they get to choose. Brian, I just want to tell you say thank you so much for coming on, and how much I appreciate you sharing your experiences, your perspective, and the incredible work that you're doing in our field. And for everyone listening, if you'd like to connect with Brian and learn more about his work or explore ACT curriculum, we're going to post the links below for his website, social media, and today's show notes. Thank you again for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, leave us a review, share this episode so we can continue to make this free for our audience and share all of these wonderful opportunities and experiences. And Brian, do you have anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we sign off?
Behavior analysis is the nerdiest way to be compassionate. It's wonderful because it helps us to understand what's going on in a way that is kind and heartfelt and understanding. When my first paper gets published, I'm on the final steps for it. It's going to be a response paper to Dr. Montrose Wolf, and social validity.
Okay.
Yes, I'm going big,
All right.
but it's an important point, and the heart of that point is, I'm just going to boil it down, is we need to remember that we need to start making social validity start with the rights of the individuals we're serving, and their rights include them being human. And then the big mistake and the feedback that we've gotten for that is that we've not been letting kids be kids. I'm a parent. I have a 3-year-old. The other day, I made a mistake with my 3-year-old where I discovered, because there was a lot of factors involved, and I had to be kind to myself with this, but like I was holding a very important boundary, and it was a safety boundary, and my daughter was upset, and she was making noises of protest, which she had every right to be. And I got her in a safe place, and I was staying neutral, and I was placing the expectations, and I'm like, okay, I'll give you some space, but when you're ready. And she was saying something and I wasn't hearing it. Now I'm half deaf and I probably have an auditory processing disorder, and she was screaming, and I missed that she was saying kisses and hugs. And we were in that state where she was in dysregulation and asking for kisses and hugs. And it wasn't until my wife stepped in and said, "Hey, I don't think you're hearing this." She's saying, and immediately I flipped around. Because here's the thing, ACT doesn't just apply to our kids, it applies to us.
Yes.
And in that moment, I was not living my values. It was not intentional, but it doesn't change the fact that in that moment, I was hurting my daughter. So I immediately dropped to my knees. I immediately apologized to her. I immediately offered her kisses and hugs. I immediately focused on soothing and co-regulation, which are verified behavior that has been tracked. And any behavior analyst who says that co-regulation is not a thing does not understand human development or the phylogeny of us as organisms.
Yeah.
Co-regulation is so critical. And I pushed in on co-regulation, and it made a huge difference. And when I was apologizing, she was saying, "It's okay, it's okay." I'm like, "No, it's not okay. You can say thank you for saying sorry." So I taught her the language so that way she's not opening herself up to be hurt in the future by justifying those. I'm like, "No, Daddy was not listening to you. That was not okay.
Right.
I'm sorry." And you can say, "Thank you for saying sorry." Okay. And we work through it and we move forward. ACT applies for all humans because it gives us the skills and things we need, because there was a part of me that didn't want to acknowledge that harm. There was a part of me that was saying, well, you were doing fine. You were doing what you were supposed to do. You were doing better than your father did, right? Those thoughts pop up. And each time those thoughts pop up, I said, yes, you're right. And yes, and.
Perfect.
Remember, yes, and. So
Yes.
last closing thought. Sorry for that big, long diatribe at the end.
No, that was beautiful. And I love the way that you turned that around. That was great.
But the ending thought is to remember, human first, human always.
Thank you so much, Brian. I really appreciate it. I think that it's definitely eye-opening conversation with you. And just remember, listeners, you are not in this journey alone.